Welcome, everyone. Welcome here at the back. Thank you very much for being with us today at this super event with Cassandra Clare. I would like to thank Niloa, who is here with us today. She will be interviewing the author. I am Irene Lucas. I'm the editor at Crossbooks. It is marvelous to have this event with all of you here and to be able to share this with them. I'm not going to introduce them because I think we all know what Cassandra Clare has achieved with her books and how much we have dreamt thanks to her. I'm going to share a little anecdote with regard to dreams. Two dreams that occur at the same time, two girls at the same time in different cities and countries. One wants to become a writer. She dreams about stories. And the other one wants to make these stories reach readers. In 2004, 20 years ago, one of these girls started writing a story. It will be the first story that she will publish, City of Bones. And thousands of kilometers from her, there's another girl who is a reader. She makes reports for a publishing house. And the publishing house, when the first girl sells the copyright of her book to a US publishing house, sends the book to the Spanish publishing house. And the reader reads this book and says, wow, this is different. This is completely different from other things. It mixes many different elements, different genres. But what is even better is that it has characters who make you dream. The reader writes this report, the publishing house buys the book, and this is when the dreams of these two girls start aligning. The first one achieves international success because her books, Shadow Hunters, are published in 20 different countries. And the other girl, the other woman who lives in Spain, who was a reader, after a few years, during which she also achieves her dream, and it is to be here with all of you, with Cassandra, being her publisher and being super proud of having people such as all of you, as Niloa, myself as an editor, and especially Cassandra, who dream and vibrate in the same way with fantasy, to make these characters our own, and that we not only dream when we read in all the fiction novels, all these incredible books, but that we can also dream in real life. So please enjoy this gathering and this conversation between the two of them.
Vale. Hola.
Okay, hello everyone. Are you nervous? No? No nerves. We're going to have a great time. First of all, thank you to Fundación Telefónica for this space. Thank you to Crossbooks for this opportunity. And I also wanted to call upon Patricia Nunes, who is one of the translators of Shadow Hunters, who is here with us in this room. So please put your hands together for her. And of course, thank you to Cassandra. Welcome to Spain after 15 years. So please welcome. 15 years since the last time she was here in Spain, since that signature after publishing the first series. City of Bones, City of Ashes, City of Glass, and I wanted to talk about your career since 2009 until now. What has changed? What has changed in your person? It is an intense question, but you're not the same writer. You've evolved since 2009. Well, which changes have you experienced? Which are the experiences that have shocked you the most?
Oh, changes that have shocked me the most? Yeah. Okay. I think, I've been writing the Shadowhunter books for 20 years, something like that, so almost half of my life. And I hardly remember, what it was like before Shadowhunters. But I do remember when I came to Spain in 2009, and I was so surprised to see so many people. I thought I would come to the book fair, there would be maybe 15 people that wanted my signature. And there was this long line, and I remember the people dressed like Magnus and like Isabel. And I had just come from Germany, where everyone is like this. We like your book. Which is fine, but it was so different because everyone was putting out their hands. Oh, we love the book, and we love you, and I was like, oh, this is great. I really like it here. And I think, you never lose that. I'm really excited to be here now and to see so many people. It's always rewarding, and it's always special. So it's not like something you get bored with. Meeting readers is the best part, I think. Otherwise, Shadowhunters has changed so much since City of Glass. Mortal Instruments became 6 books. There were Infernal Devices, Dark Artifices, Last Hours. There was a movie, there was a TV show. So I feel like I've been through all these ups and downs, with the project. And I think the thing that surprised me the most is I thought one day, I'll get tired of it. I'm gonna run out of ideas, but that never happened.
Ahora vamos a entrar.
Now we're going to talk about Swordcatcher. First of all, could you please explain what the novel is about and what happens in this new world compared to Shadowhunters that, we know that world very well. This is a new universe. This is a complex world. And can you tell us a little bit more about Swordcatcher?
Sure. It's a complex world. It's a novel of political intrigue, I would say. And it is the story of 2 different characters who live in the city called Castellane, which is a sort of crossroads where everybody comes to trade in an alternate universe, sort of Renaissance France. And you get people from all over, all different cultures, all different backgrounds. And 2 of our main characters, we have a boy named Kel, and he is the body double to the prince of the city. So they sort of kidnapped him when he was a boy and used magic to change him so that he looks more like the prince and he can stand in for him at any kind of event where there's danger or Connor, the prince, is likely to be murdered. Kel will be murdered instead. So his job is pretty much to be murdered. And he has some thoughts about that. And then our other main character is a girl named Lynn, and she is one of the Ashkar, who are a minority in the society, a religious minority, and she is a doctor. She heals people, and she uses a combination of medicine and magic. And so eventually someone does try to murder Kel because they think he is Connor, and so Lynn is called in to see if she can save his life. She's drawn into the political intrigue and the drama and the danger and the things that are going on in the palace. I think that's probably all I can say without spoiling the book, but it's a complicated book. It was very different for me to make up a whole world from scratch, from the beginning, instead of sort of combining magic with the world that we already know. So for me, it was a real adventure, and I hope that it will be for you too.
Me gustaría saber.
I would like to know, when did you think about this idea? Because you were still in the world of shadow hunters. When did you conceive this new world? What were the most difficult things and the easiest things for you? And how long did you take to write the first draft until you finished the novel?
Okay. I came up with the idea 2017. Long time ago. I was actually on a writing retreat in Italy with some friends of mine. So many of them are people you've probably heard of. So Holly Black, Lee Bardugo, you know, my friends Kelly, Link, Maureen Johnson, all of them are also writers. And so usually when we go on a retreat, it's because we're finishing a project. I was finishing, I think it was Lord of the Shadows, and I got to the end, I was done. And so I started to kind of scribble out new ideas, and I had this idea for Swordcatcher, and I worked on it and developed it, and I showed it to, you know, Lee and Holly and the rest, and said, you know, is this a story? You know, is this? I think it's a story. Does it look like a story? And they said, yeah, this is a story. You know, keep going. You know, keep developing this idea. So. Eventually, I called my agent and I said, well, I have this idea. It's not for a Shadow Hunter book, though. It's a different book, and this is a high fantasy book, and it's a book for adults. So I don't know what you're going to think about me writing a book for adults. And he said, I think you have to remember that the people who read your book when they were, you know, City of Bones, when they were 15 or 30 now. And I was like, oh no. I'm so old. He's right, though, and I thought, okay, you know, he's not wrong, and a lot of my readers are adults, and so I went ahead with the project, sold it, and then I spent several years developing it before I wrote it. So yeah.
Como has comentado, el mundo es muy complejo.
As you said, this world is very complex. What was one of the first elements that you built in this world? Because you said there's trade, exchanges, and many different houses. What did you start with in this world?
Well, I remember someone once said to me something about building fantasy, which I always thought was smart, which is geography is destiny. So where do you put your city, you know, or your kingdom or whatever? Like, you know, you have to think about, you know, what creates that world. And so I thought, I know what I want from Castellan, from the city. I want it to be a center of trade the way that Venice was sort of during the 16th century at the height of the Silk Road. So I first, you know, built Castellan. It's on top of a marsh surrounded by mountains and, you know, sand. You can't grow anything there. You can't have agriculture. You can't have goods that you might sell. The only thing you can do is trade. So I, you know, was like, okay, I know where it is. How does the government work? Well, if it's based on trade, then we have 12 families. Each family has the complete rights over some kind of trade goods, silk, spices, glass, perfume, something like that. And so they control all of the trade, which makes them immensely wealthy. And because they're so wealthy, they're very powerful. So the city is ruled by a council of these wealthy elite individuals. And I didn't, you know, knowing that, I then was like, okay, so you take a situation where you have a king, you have these 12, you know, extremely rich families, and they all want different things. They all want power. And then you set them against each other, right? They're going to fight. They're all going to want the power. They're all going to want the advantage. And the question, you know, of the book is really like, what would people do to get power? And is it possible to have absolute power and still be a good person?
Hablando de...
When we talk about receiving advice to be able to write a novel, as you said, it is a novel for adults. At the beginning, it was an important change. You might have been a little bit concerned. It was a challenge, this change. And I want to talk about George R.R. Martin. George read her novel. He's the author of Game of Thrones, just in case you don't know this. What about this? How did you feel? How did this happen? How was all of this experience? How did it come about?
Well, I had never met George R. R. Martin before he read Swordcatcher, but it is very normal before your book comes out for your publisher to send your book to 1 million people. You know, they'll send it to a lot of other writers to get feedback, and I didn't know they had sent it to George, and if I did know, I would never have assumed he would have had time to read it. You know, he's pretty busy. So when they sent the email and said, you know, here, George liked the book and here's what he said, I was like, I was at Holly's house and I couldn't even talk. She was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, trying to make gestures. Like, I finally was like, "Come over here and read the email." Like, I can't explain it. I was so excited. And then when I was on tour in America, I went to Santa Fe to do an event with him. And we had lunch and we gossiped and he told me lots of stuff about the behind the scenes Game of Thrones that I'm not going to tell you. I'm a bad person. But I will tell you one thing, which is that I was walking to the bookstore where I was going to meet him and I passed a railway station. And this railway station is this huge train. The train is painted to look like a dragon. And I turned to my publicist and said, "That's weird. That train is painted to look like a dragon." And he said, "Oh, that's George's train. He likes to drive it around."
Really? Wow.
And I thought, wow. I mean, I can't even imagine a world in which you can have your own train.
Wow. Imaginad el nivel que tiene.
Wow, this is amazing, no? He walks around with his train. Well, moving to more serious topics, it's been a challenge to move to adult literature. Which has been the positive and negative challenges when it came to writing this novel? It's never easy to write a novel, and with this important shift, is there anything that you enjoyed really a lot and something that frustrated you? Can you give us a little bit of both?
Oh, I mean, there was a lot that frustrated me. You know, the structure of the book, is very complicated. It jumps back and forth between two different points of view that often don't match up. These characters often don't see each other for a long period of time, so you're telling the same story, but these very different viewpoints. And then there's sort of a third viewpoint from this overarching, like they're interstitials that contain pieces of a book that exists in this world. So all those stories have to come together at the end. So I did keep thinking, why did I do this? Why did I set it up this way? Why don't I just have one person telling this story? Or I could have 10 people telling this story, and then I wouldn't have to worry about things like, why is Kel in this scene? Or why is Lynn in this scene? And, you know, there's, with the world that you've just invented, you have issues that you don't have with something like Shadowhunters, where, you know, the books are set in London, Manhattan, Los Angeles, and we all know that these are real places that really exist. I don't have to explain it, you know, and say Los Angeles is a city and, you know, it's next to the ocean. You can basically assume that your readership knows all of these things. They know how cars work and restaurants and just the basic things about life. But you can't assume any of that with high fantasy. Everything has to be explained. How do people get from one place to another? How do they light the rooms that they're in? How does their medicine work? What does their money look like? And you have to do it in a way where you're not just lecturing the reader, and you don't take, you know, 2 pages to explain what every coin looks like and, you know, what all the wheels look like or something like that. So for me, it was a lot of research and then a lot of looking at, you know, how other people had written written this and how, I looked at a lot of high fantasy just to get the sense of how do you communicate all of this in a way that feels, like you're telling a living story about living people. And since I think the first time you do anything, it's scary. My first book was scary. The first time when I wrote Infernal Devices, writing historical was very scary. And so this was scary in that same way. And my husband will tell you I spent a lot of time walking around the house going, why did I decide to do this? It was so stupid. Why didn't I do something easy like a picture book? So, but I think that writers are also people who thrive on challenge. And, I'm sure I have a lot of writers in the audience here. And when you get the idea for a story, you know that it gets in you, it gets teeth in you, and it's there until you tell it. So there's nothing I often think there's nothing you really can do. That those teeth are going to be there till you get the story out of you. So in that sense, when I was done with it, I did feel very like I did it,
Tienes que estar orgullosa, es un libro.
You have to be very proud. It is an amazing book, really. Okay, so now we're going to talk about shadow hunters. I think everybody wants to hear more. We have a beautiful edition. 17 years have gone by since the beginning, quite a long time. Could you share a memory from those first events with regard to the 3 first books, some memory that you have really engraved in your mind?
Sorry about that.
A good memory or like a bad memory or good memory? Okay. Not the time someone threw up on me during the signing.
Are you joking?
No.
Oh my God. Oh God.
It's a rich tapestry. Honestly, that really wasn't that bad. Okay, let me think. It's one of those things where I remember my first book came out and, nobody had heard of me. I went on tour with Holly. I had a nice time because I was with Holly. Nobody came to see me. It was fine. Then the second book came out and I went on tour and, 10 people, 15 people would come and to see me. And that was great, Also, I was very excited to meet anybody who read my books. And then I remember with my third book, I flew to Toronto to do my first event, and they said, there's a lot of people. And I thought they meant like 100 people. So I go in the bookstore, there's 1,000 people. And I was like, they can't be here to see me. Like, that's not possible. And I feel like I didn't see the change, between book 1, book 2, book 3. It's just something that sort of happened organically. And I remember just being completely shocked. And it was a good shock. And then also I thought, from now on, my life is going to be different. And I went home and I quit my job.
Well done.
It turned out well. I don't know if it was a smart idea, but it turned out okay.
En un principio,
At the beginning, Shadowhunters was not going to be as long. In the 5th anniversary edition, you explained that this world starts in the 3rd book. We have the infernal devices, the dark artifices, the eldest curses, etc. The wicked powers. We don't have the translation into Spanish yet, the official translation. We have the titles of the last trilogy. I would like to read them out. The Last King of Feria, The Last Prince of Hell, and The Last Shadow Hunter. Cassandra, what is happening? Can you tell us something about this? Because do I have to make an appointment with my therapist? Can you share this with us? What's this trilogy about? Just give us a little peek, please.
So, for those who have read the Dark Artifices, the trilogy picks up about 3 years after the end of the Dark Artifices. So, things we know are sort of bad in the Shadowhunter world. There's been a big split everybody in the country of Idris is walled off away from the rest of the shadow hunters. So Alec Lightwood is leading sort of the free world of the shadow hunters, but they're missing all of these people, and they don't know what they're doing in there. They keep trying to find out, but they have no idea. It's completely blocked off, so it's a secret. Meanwhile, so our story focuses on Drusilla, who's the younger sister of Julian Blackthorne, and Ty Blackthorne, her brother, and Kit Herondale, who is a Herondale, and also was in Dark Artifices as well, and has a very complicated heritage. And so I'm trying to think what I can tell you, but we know that let's see, that the throne of Fairy is sort of up for grabs. Both Kit and also Ash Morgenstern, who's the son of Sebastian Morgenstern, who is Clary's brother. Both of them have a claim on this sort of throne of Fairy. So there's definitely, an issue there about who's going to get that. But we also have the evil version of Jace, who is now in our world, and he really wants Clary. He wants her to love him. He wants to get her back, but he has other plans too, bigger plans for the world, and they're not, as we're not surprised, they're not very nice. And then so the very beginning of the book, something happens, something bad, and Drusilla must go to Fairy. To the world of Fairy I can't tell you exactly what, fulfill a quest, find a thing, and Kit and Ty are thrown into the situation where Ty comes to Kit and he says, "You're the only person who can help me," and Kit is still mad at Ty. He's been mad at him for 3 years, so I guess he's a grudge holder, but he understands this is really important, and he's like, okay, I'll help you with this. After that, nothing. So everybody's on a quest. Drew is on a quest. Kit and Ty are on a quest. Everybody is sort of looking for the solution to this thing that's happening.
Wow, eso es bastante. Es para digerirlo, o sea.
It's interesting. Working on the last hours for several years, and then Swordcatcher, and so I was like, I have to go back, reread all the Dark Artifices, and I was like, oh my God, this really ends on a cliffhanger.
Uno muy grande, sí.
That's a big one, yes. Now I would like to mix both worlds, Shadowhunters and the Swordcatcher. First of all, which character do you enjoy writing about the most in both worlds? You can only choose one from both sagas.
Soy mala,
I'm evil, right?
I think that they're not that dissimilar, interestingly. I think in Shadowhunters is Magnus. Magnus is always having a good time. And in Swordcatcher, it's the Ragpicker King, who is not unlike Magnus, actually. And I just thought about it. I was like, oh, they're both both mysterious, they're both powerful, they both kind of, gather people around them. So clearly I have a thing for characters like that.
Me encanta.
I love that. Which character of Shadowhunters would be a good swordcatcher?
I mean, honestly, Jace, I think. He is,
Definitely.
To be a sword catcher, you have to be a really good warrior, a really good fighter, fast on your feet, and not ask too many questions. Or I feel like, like Julian would be like, I don't want to do that. That doesn't seem like a good idea.
Se iría con Emma.
He would go off with Emma, right?
He would,
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Jace, I think he would do it. He was sort of brought up that way.
Definitely. Y ya la última.
Last question. which characters of Shadowhunters would be for Bataille?
Wait, which characters from Shadowhunters would be?
No, from Swordcatcher. Which ones would be Paravatai?
Oh, Connor and Kel. I think
Definitely.
that's obvious. Yeah. Like, I look at them and I think, oh, you know, they're not exactly like Will and Jem, but there are things about them that remind me of Will and Jem. They've been brought up together. They've known each other since they were children. You know, they love each other in this way where they understand each other in a manner that nobody else can understand them. And I think, you know, they would definitely be Paravatai.
I love that answer, to be honest. I feel that way. Hasta aquí mis...
Well, these are my questions. I would like to open the floor. I'm sure you have questions for Cassandra Clare. So, okay, any questions? There's one here, one over there. Over there. Let's start over there. I love your books. First of all, thank you for coming. I have 2 questions. Are you going to clarify the genealogical tree of Shadowhunters?
Okay, so I have decided that I am never going to do another family tree for Shadowhunters until the whole series is over, and I'm never going to write another book because it gave me so much trouble. And I realized that was a terrible mistake because you lock yourself into something that you've never thought about that as a story. Like, I created the Shadowhunter family tree. I wasn't thinking of those people as people. And later, when they became people, they didn't want to do the things that were in the family tree. So I had to say, okay, no, that's wrong. And then I don't want to do that to people again. So, and only when all of the books are over.
Vale. Y segunda pregunta.
Second question, are you going to make us suffer with Alec and Magnus as you did with Tessa and Will?
I mean, not in exactly the same way, because you don't want to repeat the same story. But I understand that Alec and Magnus have the same problem, which is that one of them is immortal and one of them isn't. Right? So that is a problem that we definitely have, and you know that I don't like making people immortal to fix problems like that. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. I can't promise that you will suffer the same way, but if you do suffer, it will be in a different way.
Hola, bueno.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for coming to Spain. Shadowhunters, well, I've read all of them for many years, and I'm going to focus on wicked powers. I would like to talk about Drew. He is one of my favorite characters, and I want to ask you, what can we expect from her? Can you tell us more, or something might happen with Ash? Anything that you might be able to tell us?
Definitely. Ash knows about Drew. We know that from the Dark Artifices, and he may even be a little bit obsessed with her. He carries around a picture of her that Julian drew, and all of the time. Although I don't think he would tell Drew that. And I like them because they are very different. And Drew is a very, I'm trying to think of how to say this without swearing, like I would say a take no bullshit character. Like, she is very confident, she is very funny, and she doesn't have time for anything that she thinks is false or silly or inauthentic. And so when she is with Ash, she's constantly pushing at him because he has all this stuff about being, the Prince of Fairy and whatnot, and she doesn't really have any time for any of that. So she's constantly sort of deflating his ego and sort of pushing on all of the things that he's been sort of taught by the Seelie Queen and by Janus, his sort of father. And so I think she's a really good influence on him. Let me put it that way. But they also have a lot of a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing. So I can't say they start off on the same page, but I think we all know how that can turn out. I love Drew. She's just a really fun character to write. I love how confident she is and how much she doesn't take any crap from anybody. That's always the kind of person I wanted to be, so I like writing about that kind of person.
Well, first of all, I love your books. I haven't been in this world for too long. I haven't had that much time. I started the books in November. I finished them last month. I'd like to ask you about Matthew Fairchild. He's one of my favorite characters, and he's the type of character that I really love. He's full of light, and he's showing off, but then in the inside he's got his issues and his doubts, and I would like to know how you write this kind of character.
Matthew, it's interesting because I've been thinking about him a lot because I was editing the story. There's a novella about Matthew in the Kickstarter that I did that sort of follows Matthew after the end of the last hours. And it's really the first thing I've done where I'm in his viewpoint and talking from his point of view. So it's been really interesting to stop and think a lot more about how he thinks. We've always seen him from the outside. And so I think, for a character like Matthew, it's interesting to write a character who is so flawed and yet also, I hope, sympathetic. Matthew had something fairly terrible happen to him. He also made a really bad decision at one point in his life. So Matthew's story, I think, is the story of needing to learn to forgive yourself. Matthew does that with the help, I think, of having friends who really love him and really care about him. And to me, I just think that there's something that's really important about that story. I didn't want in the last hours for Matthew to be saved by a romance. I wanted to write a character who was broken in this way and learned how to heal because of their friends and their family, and so and themselves, their own strength. So to me, that was really important. And so now writing this short story where Matthew does have a romance, it's kind of nice to come at it thinking Matthew is now in this place to have a romantic partner because he has healed himself.
Buenas.
Hello. First of all, I love your books. The first one of Shadow Hunters was the first book that I shared with my mother. It made us much closer, so thank you very much for that. It is said that the third time you do something, you achieve. Will we have another attempt of adaptation of Shadow Hunters, maybe of the Infernal Devices? Any other attempts, do you think?
And they'll do like a radio play or puppets. I don't know. I've tried to talk to people in Hollywood about it. I've sold the adaptation rights to Swordcatcher pretty quickly, and the problem is that the company that bought the Mortal Instruments and Infernal Devices and all that, they still own it. So it's really up to them whether something gets made or something doesn't get made. And I think, after having a movie and then having a TV show, and also right now in Hollywood, every time I talk to anyone about it, they say, oh, YA, nobody wants to make YA. Nobody wants to do young adult. They sort of ignore all of the extremely successful shows that they have that are young adult. So I'll say, well, what about, this? What about this? And they're like, they come up with some excuse, why that's not young adult. It is. I'll say that, what about Shadow and Bone? And they're like, that's not young adult. And I'm like, it is though. So I think that they push back on the idea of doing young adult. None of them necessarily want to do something that they think of as a teen show. So that's the biggest problem that I've had in talking to people about Infernal Devices, and also that it's historical, and historical costs a lot of money. So I think, it's one of those things where the project has to wait for somebody who is really passionate about it to come and want to make it, as that's the only way it's going to get made, is if somebody who really loves it wants to make it. So fingers crossed.
Hola.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much. I've been reading you for 15 years, so almost half of my life. I wanted to ask you about the new book. I just started it. Are we going to have 2 books? Do we know the name of the second book? But after the Rag Picker King, are we going to have more books in the world of Castellana?
I would like to do 4 books in the world of Castellan. The second book is coming out early next year, and it's called The Rag Picker King. So I think you can tell it's a little bit about the Rag Picker King. It's one of the characters. But yeah, so it's first book, Swordcatcher. Second book is The Rag Picker King. The third book is called The Bone Conjurers. So, I'm definitely planning for there to be more books.
Hola.
Hello. I was here on my way today, and I realized that Clockwork Princess was published in March 2013. It was the first book that I read in English without being mandatory for me, and I learned English thanks to this book, thanks to you. I'm very happy to be here, and I really learned English to be able to read the books. Shadowhunters in English. I was 13 in those days. Now I'm going to turn 25, and I would like to ask you, how do you see yourself with regard to finishing Shadowhunters? I remember it was going to, when you announced the Wicked Powers, that title, we had that title, everything seemed to be prepared. And what do you expect from the future? And when it comes to changing to high fantasy, I've really enjoyed the books. I'd like to read more books from you, and I would like to see or ask you, what do you expect from the future, and why this book, The Swordcatcher, is different from Shadowhunters, and with regard to what you were related to or identified with Shadowhunters, what's the difference now?
Okay. So first, you're correct about the Wicked Powers. For a long time I've been talking about it as being the end of the Shadowhunters sort of world series, and I still think that that's true. That's the plan, is that those will be the last books. So that's the titles: The Last King of Fairy, The Last Shadowhunter, etc. So it's weird to work on it and think that this would be the last time. So I try not to think about it too much. And then, but that doesn't mean that I want to stop writing. So I'd like to ideally, continue writing in the world of Castellan, write more Swordcatcher. And then I also, when I sold The Wicked Powers to my publisher, I also sold 2 books of a new YA series. So then I would be going back and writing YA fantasy where I started. So I'm excited about that too. And I would say that, for me, the big thing about Swordcatcher, and what was different was the age of the characters. There were ways in which I related to them that there are ways in which I relate to my teenage characters, because I think, I retain a really vivid memory of what it was like to be a teenager, and that's always in my head when I'm writing YA. For Swordcatcher, I was accessing a different part of my memories, because these characters are more like 24, 25. So they're concerned about things like like their jobs, and I mean, if like assassin and like murderer and poisoner and thief is a job, but and when they're falling in love, it's not necessarily first love. They may have been in love before. This may be their true love, but it's not that kind of emotion of the first love that I'm usually writing about with Shadowhunters. So for me, it was just very interesting to be accessing this very different time in someone's life and the different way that they think and that they react to things.
Vale, dos preguntas.
Two more questions, because Cassandra has to sign books now. So, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Apologies. First of all, thank you for the diversity that you include in the books. You're amazing, absolutely amazing. Thank you. They are really, really important to me.
Gracias.
Lynn is a strong character. She is empowered. She fights to be a doctor in a world of men. How did you get inspired to write this empowered character?
Lynn is the kind of girl that I do love to write, who is always pushing back. She refuses to accept things the way that they are, which is something I relate to very much. And so every time that somebody tells her that she can't be a doctor because she's a woman, or she can't go outside the walls of the city, the walled city where she lives, because she's Ashkar, she can't do this, she can't do that, she can't get the books that she needs in order to heal her friend, she fights them. And I think there's something, I wrote a lot of this book during the pandemic, and I think to me there was something about someone who is in a world that doesn't make sense to them, where the rules and the prejudices and the bigotry don't make sense to them, and they're always pushing and fighting it. That was really appealing at that, especially at that specific time, and I tried to put that into Lynn. So I'm really glad if you liked her. One more, and I pointed at you at the beginning, so.
We have talked about Shadowhunters, the Chronicles of Castellane, but I would like to ask you two questions. One is in Fireferton. These two books, what are they about? Is it a different world? Is related to the Chronicles of Castellane?
YA series, the In Fire Foretold, that one. It's not related to Castellane, and it's not related to Shadowhunters. It's a totally different book that started out as a novella that I was writing and became, of course, a book, because everything I write gets bigger. So it's actually about the word for this would be, in English, would be portal fantasy. So this is a story about it begins with a young girl, a child, and she is the daughter of the magician of the king's house in what is clearly a high fantasy world that is not our world. And so it is discovered that she has a power that is basically she's not supposed to have. That's very dangerous if anybody were to find out about it. And her father, the magician, opens a portal and shoves her through to our world. She grows up in our world, not having any memory of the place that she came from, and not having any memory of magic or of her parents or anything. She doesn't know where she came from, and as far as she's concerned, and that she's been told she was found wandering the streets when she was 6 years old, no memory of where she came from. And that stays that way until strange things start to happen in her life. And she winds up going to the library near her house, and while she is at the library, a very large monster appears, and at the same time, a man on horseback appears and is like, if you want to survive, come with me, we're going to another world. So that's the beginning of the book, and we take her back to the world we go back to the world where she came from. We discover sort of what's going on in that world, who this guy is, who the other guys are, what happened with her family, what is her power, how can it be useful in the kingdom, which is in a very dangerous situation. And so it's very much a kind of interesting, to me, mashup between Shadowhunters and Castellan, because half of it does take place in a high fantasy world, and the other half of it takes place in our world. But those worlds are kind of cut in half. They're separate. Only a very few people can go back and forth.
Bueno, lo segundo y
The second question. Thank you. I'm a fan since 2013. I've grown with you, and I think that many of us are in the same situation, regardless of when we started, because we adore all the worlds that you write about. When I saw that you were coming, there was a question on the Tales of the Shadow Academy. We haven't have the publication, also Ghost of the Shadow Market, haven't been published. We all adore George, and we don't have him in Spanish. So please, can you tell us about what can be done?
I don't know. Wait, you don't have George R. R. Martin in Oh, well, I thought you were saying you don't have George R. R. Martin in Spanish. I was like, that's not possible. Okay, I understand. You don't have George Lovelace, right? I'm very sorry about that. You are going to have to harass my publisher. That's Planeta over there, and tell them that you really want Ghosts of the Shadow Market in Spanish, and you want them to publish it here, and you're okay if they publish it in paperback, right? Because they probably will. But, just tell them you want it. And that you'll read it. And the more of you that kind of come out and say that you'll read it, the more likely that it will get published.
They even brought, look at them. Oh my God.
Hey! Okay. That's really I did not organize this. I didn't know this was going to happen.
No, you did not.
That's amazing. Oh my God, you guys are so amazing. I love you.
Muchas gracias por venir.
Thank you very much for coming. I suppose that now, in order, we will organize the signing. 2 books per person. Patience and have fun. Thank you very much.